Today I'd like to share with you the next chapter of my story that I call my story, which of course is not a very creative way for me to address my own story, but a better title will come as we progress. This is chapter 12 and I call it the silent treatment. Let me share it with you. In the months that followed Chad's placement, we made arrangements to pick him up on weekends. The Child Welfare Agency required that we work through them to make all contacts with the foster family and our child, a process they routinely engaged with their many court-ordered child neglected and abused placements, even though ours was consensual. We were required to call ahead of time and make arrangements with the agency to see or to take Chad. They in turn called Mona and then got back with us. The pattern required a couple days each time and necessitated that we plan days ahead and complete our plans during the work week of the agency or forfeit our visit entirely each time we wanted to see Chad. We made arrangements to bring him home with us on weekends, a task that required a half-day round trip each time to load him and all of his supplies up to bring him home, and another half-day reversing the process at the end of our visit. Within a few months, in comparing notes with Mona, we recognized that Chad had seemed to fidget often and had more frequent seizures with us than he did with Mona and Burl. When we spent time with him at their home, he was obviously calmer and happier. It was not until we figured out that the hubbub of their home, the noise and the kids coming and going actually calmed and lightened his spirit, that we realized that he was more settled and happy there than with us. Our quiet place, he let us know, was not as enchanting and harmonious for him. Within a short time, we stopped bringing him home and adapted to just visiting him at Mona and Burl's. They adapted to a more rigorous full-time schedule, and we adjusted to having shorter visits and less frequent contact with Chad. The changes we made added more responsibility upon Mona and significantly reduced their family mobility, but clearly benefited Chad. It also gave Kate and me a time to heal, although we would not have seen it that way at that time. Kate and I really never discussed bringing Chad back home permanently. In the many years since, and through hardships I will share, I came to understand that the heavy load Kate must have felt being in constant nurturance of her own profoundly damaged child. She was one, I believe, who mourns each day in that space, and it takes a heavy toll. For me, as time passed, having Chad successfully transition to be with Mona and Burl was a godsend. Had I been the sole arbiter, I would not have been able to let him be with anyone but us. At the same time, I was in no way capable of providing his ongoing care. Mona's dedication to Chad bridged my irreconcilable dilemma. As we became more and more comfortable with the deep caring and ongoing nurturance Mona provided for Chad, we opened up to them, and they did likewise with us. Mona grounded and dispelled our anxieties and kept us fully informed of his progress as well as his tribulations. We also began more and more to exchange about the timing of visits. Working through the agency was a huge and time-consuming nuisance, and we told them so. For a time, they did not budge. But when both Mona and Kate let them know that we were fine without them, they finally allowed us to set our own schedules and visits. With the removal of the state as our intermediary, a lifelong bond between us and Chad's other parents emerged, one that is dear to me still. As I have already alluded, sometimes little rural communities rise to respond to the strife of its members, supporting parents and families in many ways. They have fundraisers, potlucks, rallies to bolster members of the community in challenging times. In other situations, there is a deafening silence, and the afflicted family must go quietly forward alone. Even though I had grown up there, and to this day cannot imagine how it might have been different, our path through the many phases of this trauma was of the silent nature in our community. To this day, I can easily count all the people in the community who ever even asked me about Chad. From time to time, I shared this loneliness with my parents, who were also active, engaged, and lifelong members of the community. Their only salient explanation was that Chad's condition was both so traumatic and so desperately irreversible that no one knew what to do or say. We had a child that lived, but never would the news about him be hopeful, heartening, or upbeat. There was no closure. He had not died. There would be no happy ending. But the din of silence only added to the quiet burden Kate and I shared in large part alone. Having him 75 miles away had not returned Kate and me to our early childless state of quote, unquote, normal. My participation in quote, unquote, normal died the day Chad was born, never to return. M. Scott Peck wrote The Road Less Traveled in some part as a takeoff of the theme of Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken. Both Frost and Peck put forth the idea that as one comes to a fork in the road, travelers consciously choose the less traveled fork, giving them richer, more nuanced life journey. My road less traveled was distinctly not a choice. It is more a case of me swiftly and confidently forging along the mainstream path with not a care in the world, only to have some giant troll grab me off that wide, smooth trail and toss me deep into the forest where there was no clear path in any direction whatever. Suddenly I found myself clawing my way through deep briar patches to obtain any footing whatever. I had no idea how to reclaim my old path, nor could I have known then I would never see the main path again. I hated the new rocky road, the precarious obstacle-strewn path onto which I had so unceremoniously been dumped. One day I watched a couple of my former schoolmates walking to the library with their daughter. She was perhaps 5. Mom and Dad walked alongside her, each holding her hands as they merrily traipsed along the sidewalk. She alternately skipped and then was playfully swung into the air by her parents, and they would all laugh out loud as she squealed in the air. It dawned on me that she had been born the same week that Chad had. There they were, all wondrously engaged in natural family fun. But I saw it differently. That simple expression of togetherness was something we would never have with Chad. I wanted to weep right there on the street. Why, I asked myself, had they been granted such joy? And all we had was profound sorrow. Why had families all around us blossomed into happy little bastions of childlike tranquility while it completely eluded us? Busy as I had become, no matter how swiftly I raced through life, the truth remained that I had been profoundly wounded. No amount of frenzied activity would cover that wound over or help it heal. I felt cheated, forgotten, and alone. Nothing made sense except the deep throbbing and ever-present pain of it. It never even occurred to me that I had been given a great and singular gift. Nor could I have any way comprehended that it was not the last of my primal challenges. I believe I would have collapsed had I known that there was more to come. It would take decades for me to fully assimilate the how and why I had been so blessed. Thanks for listening. If you like it, give a thumbs up. If you like, subscribe if you haven't already. If you have not seen my earlier chapters, they are all available. You need only search for Seething Frog, My Story. I think someone has so nicely collaborated and put them all into an ongoing playlist for us, and that's great. In passing, I had said I would do more on the wall a few weeks ago when I worked on it, and I haven't. I will tell you, I have been on my knees more in the last 3 weeks or so than the Pope himself, but I was doing tiling of the entire house, and it is finally done, so I have come up for air. It is really good to be at this age and be able to do it, I must tell you, and do it without hesitation. And what's more than that, the other stories that I have worked on over the last few weeks are huge. They are huge stories, and they take great focus and concentration and a lot of energy, and I will attempt to wrap those up and share those with you over the next week or two as we progress. I also have the following chapter for this book done, and it should be out in the next few days. Thank you so much for all your support.